support. They have a lot of rare material and books and videos that you can only get here. So this is a rare opportunity to get some special items. And also, don't forget to thank Stephen Bassett for his extraordinary effort in bringing together this first time ever conference. He's done a fantastic job. And also, thanks for your patience with our first time effort. We're working out little glitches along the way, just to be expected, but it's a very positive, supporting environment, and we appreciate that. Up next is someone whose reputation precedes him. Can I say that, Jim? Jim Marrs is an award-winning journalist. He's the author of numerous books, including Alien Agenda, Investigating the Extraterrestrial Presence Among Us. His other book, Crossfire, The Plot That Killed Kennedy, was published to critical acclaim, and within 3 years had gone into an 8th printing in both hardbound and softbound editions. Crossfire reached the New York Times paperback nonfiction bestseller list and became a basis for the Oliver Stone film JFK. He's also the author of a book, Rule by Secrecy. He's appeared on numerous television network programs, including CNN, including the Discovery Channel, and many, many others. And he's also appeared on Larry King Live, Montel Williams, and the list goes on and on. I also want to mention that he has his workshop, Alien Agenda. His Alien Agenda book was a top-selling UFO book in the world, and it is published in at least 5 languages. Jim has just also finished his new project, The Secret of Redgate. It's a 1.5-hour documentary. He's brought it here for our viewing pleasure this weekend. He'll be talking about that somewhat, but it's available for your viewing here at the conference. It is a multidisciplinary investigation of a small Montana town that has had many ongoing experiences and sightings for at least 50 years. And Jim says it's the first time that remote viewing was used. So that is going to be an incredible thing for him to talk about as well. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome Jim Marrs.
Okay, good morning. I don't know about you all, but okay, you see my authority figure outfit, right? I've got a nice coat on, and okay, good. Now I can just talk. I'm already worn out, and I hadn't even started. All right, this is the workshop, and this is going to be cool because basically I want to make this interactive. Some of you may have seen some of the stuff, some of you haven't. I don't think you know this stuff, so I'm going to start off with this. But actually, first I want to tell you about Redgate. This is one of the most fascinating stories I've come across in my research and investigation of UFOs. Redgate is the name of an area up in the mountains east of a little town in Montana called Deer Lodge. It has been the object of urban legends and rumors and stories for at least 50 years. Come to find out, what we found out when we took a camera crew up there, we have 32 signed releases from people in the town who've all had some sort of UFO experience or have seen something or experienced something, and I think that's pretty phenomenal for a small town of 3,000 people. And it makes me wonder how many other small towns in America may have a similar type situation. We took some of the better stories, and what we did, and I think this may be one of the first times that, yeah. It's next, yeah, it's the speaker next door. I don't know what we can do about that. Okay, I can't adjust the mic here. I'll just have to talk real loud. What we did was take some of the best stories and then subject them first to polygraph examination. It showed that no one we talked to, no one that participated in this study showed any signs of deception, okay? Then we got their conscious interviews. What's that? Oh, cool. Oh, yeah. Thanks. No deception. Then we got their conscious interviews about what they remembered about the event. And then we got them to submit to hypnosis, put them under hypnosis, got further details of the event, and then we took the event and had it studied by certified, qualified remote viewers. And it's pretty phenomenal. And then we put the whole thing together, did some dramatic reenactments, have some tremendous illustrations by a really great artist, even a little animation, original music score, tried to make something that was not only informative but also entertaining. And so if any of y'all have a chance, I would hope that you go and avail yourselves of watching The Secret of Redgate. And they're going to be showing it here at the conference. It's only been shown once before, and that was before it actually was totally finished. And yet we took it to the 13th Annual International UFO Conference in Laughlin, Nevada. And I'm quite proud to state that we won the coveted EBE People's Choice Award, which is basically like first place. And I'm really excited about that because the competition included some very good documentaries from England and a documentary professionally produced by the Sci-Fi Channel. So with their deep pockets and professionals. So yeah, I was very gratified that we took the award out there. So I think I can assure you of having a very interesting experience watching The Secret of Redgate. Okay. I don't know if we'll have a chance to get into this, but if any of y'all have seen the latest issue of UFO magazine, you may have seen my little piece about the alien ghost in Roswell. Now, I know that probably sounds about as bizarre as anything you can think of. I mean, you know, what's weirder than a space alien? A space alien's ghost. But I assure you that I'm not even trying to tell you this is true. I'm just telling you that I interviewed 8 separate individuals at this hospital out there, and they said yes. Some of them been there as long as 20 years or more, and they said these stories have been there all along, and that when you start hearing the stories, it sounds like the usual ghost story, okay? Lights going off and on, footsteps heard, nobody there, doors opening and closing, elevators opening and closing, people encountering spots of intense cold. You know, okay, typical haunting thing, except the story is, and the people, at least 2 people I talked to who have actually seen this apparition, one of them more than once, say it's not human. It's a little bitty small guy with a great big head and great big eyes, okay? Sounds like a gray, all right? Now, when I find out this hospital, prior to 1967, was the base hospital for Walker Air Force Base there in Roswell. And it was built in the early 50s over the exact same spot of the previously wooden base hospital for Roswell Army Airfield. Now, isn't that, to me, this is just bizarro, but there you go, Casper the Friendly E.T. or something. All right, first off, let's talk about future technology from the past, okay? We had to invade Iraq. We just had to. You know, we just had to. I mean, there wasn't any arguing. The world said, don't do that. At least 50% of the American public says don't do that. Scott Ritter, our own weapons inspector, says they don't have any weapons of mass destruction. Hans Blix, the United Nations weapons inspector, says they don't have any weapons of mass destruction. The United Nations Atomic Energy Agency out of Vienna said no, they don't have any weapons of mass destruction. You know, and it's a preemptive strike. You know, we think maybe you're going to do something to us, so we're going to attack you first. What if every nation in the world took that philosophy? We'd be in a world of hurt, wouldn't we? Think of Mexico, where the United States say, you know, you people have messed with us for years. We think you're going to mess with us in the future, so we'll just invade you today. Come on, folks. But anyway, we had to get in there. Why? Oh, well, it's the oil. It's the oil. We had to get their oil. No, man. Before the invasion, they were shipping something like 3 million barrels of oil a day. For one thing, we were dependent only on about 16% of our imported oil from Iraq. But still, they were a member of OPEC, and they were pumping. The gas pipelines, they were flowing. We were getting about 3 million barrels a day. Okay, then we launched our attack, and it all got shut off, okay, because it's at war, and they're blowing up the pipeline. People are fighting. And now they finally got it back going again a little bit, but as I understand it, then we're only getting less than 1 million gallons a day. So we're getting less oil out of Iraq today than we were before we invaded it. So, you know, obviously it's not about oil. And besides that, we don't even need oil. We got, you know, we got Sandia oil reserves. We got oil reserves in this country and in other places that we haven't even really begun to tap yet. And then even more basic than that is we don't even need the damn oil anyway. We need to be going to alternative energy sources, cleaner energy sources. I've had engineers tell me that with a little tweaking of the carburetor, we could probably all be running hydrogen in our cars, okay, with no pollution. And if that doesn't work, then we could all shift to diesels and start running biodiesel. Everybody know about biodiesel? Hey, biodiesel you get from soybeans, corn, any kind of organic material. About a year ago, I'm in Amsterdam, and I decided I'd play tourist and ride one of their little boats around through the canals and see the city, and it was great. And after looking at all the sights for about 30 minutes, I suddenly realized the little sign that was right on the window in front of my face, you know, and it said, powered by biodiesel. Okay? This is diesel fuel that'll run on any diesel engine, runs just fine, and it's made from organic matter. Okay? Soybean, corn, whatever. So why don't we have that? Well, for that very reason. All you got to do is go find somebody with a patch of land, you can make your own fuel. They can't get a monopoly over it. Same thing with hydrogen. All you got to do is get an electrolyzing plate, crack water, you get hydrogen and oxygen. All right? So, hey, they can't get a monopoly on that. So what are they trying to get a monopoly on? We'll see. Fuel cells, that's what's coming up, okay? And what if fuel cells are dependent upon expensive metal, even gold. All right, so there's energy is involved, but there may be something even more than that. It may be future technology from the past. In the past, in history, what we find worldwide are the stories of flight. The Chinese flying dragons, okay, the Bahamas of the Hindus, where they flew through the air and attacked cities and stuff. We got everywhere. We got Ezekiel on a flaming wheel flying through the air. Come on. Our whole human history is replete with flight. So there seems to be what the evidence is continuing to build, but nobody seems to want to really contemplate, is that we, far from being the apex of civilization on this planet, we are just now pulling ourselves out of our true dark age, following a total collapse of a highly technological civilization that was on this planet, perhaps even planet-wide, in prehistory. So we're just now rediscovering things that people in this world knew about thousands and thousands of years ago. Now, I hope this little thing works. No, of course not. Oh boy. But it's not changing. Well, maybe let's try this. Ah. Thanks, Keith. It's always nice to have somebody who knows something around. I start off here by quoting from the Bible, Ecclesiastes. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There's nothing new under the sun. The ancients told us this, but we still go along thinking that, you know, we're the apex of civilization. And if that's the case, God save us. You know, I've got a friend who's going through chemotherapy right now, and it just really is killing me because I know beyond any reasonable shadow of a doubt that in not too many years we're going to look back on chemotherapy the way that today we look back on leeching. You know, oh my God, they really did that? You know, why in the world would anybody do that? You know, it's incredible. All right. Oh, hell, I went too far. All right. Let's back into this by talking about the latest scientific stuff. This is a fellow named David Hudson. David Hudson was a farmer in the Phoenix area, okay, back in the 70s, late 70s. Now, don't get the idea that he had an old beat-up Chevrolet pickup truck and, you know, and a mule. This guy was a multi-million-dollar farmer, but he was having a tough time of it because if any of y'all ever been to Phoenix, you know that it seems like half the year it's about 115 degrees, and that soil out there gets very baked and hard and dry. And he was trying to figure out how to make his farming operation work, so he began to spray soil samples with a cyanide solution. He's trying to figure out how to break up the soil, make it more arable. And what he found was when he put these chemicals, started treating the chemicals in the soil, he would get flashes. Something was flashing and something was popping. So he got to doing some analysis, and he found out in his soil were traces of gold, silver, platinum metals. So then he got the big idea, well, wait a minute, I got earth movers and I got all this stuff. Why don't, maybe I just got my old gold mine here. Maybe I can just pull enough of these precious minerals out of the soils and start making a living on that. So he used a copper electrowinning cell, and he began to run the soil samples through there trying to separate out these elements. And he came out with an element that nobody could figure out what it was. And they were single atom elements. So the something turned out to be elements that were unknown to modern science. And they're composed of a single atom, and so therefore they're called monatomic elements. Now, monatomic elements are everywhere. They're in the food we eat, the water we drink, and everything else, but it being a single atom, needless to say, that's not something that we just normally deal with. And he found out that these monatomic elements could be retrieved from such metals as gold, silver, copper, cobalt, nickel, and platinum, palladium, rhodium, iridium, ruthenium, all those iniums, okay? And but then when they would take it to get it analyzed, nobody could quite figure out what it was. And after a 2-year study, he had an Arizona analytical chemist told him, he said, I can without equivocation tell you that this is not any of the other elements on the periodic table. He said, what we have here is something that I know to be pure rhodium, and yet none of the spectroscopic analysis are saying it's rhodium. He said, this makes absolutely no sense to me. This is defying everything I've been taught in college. He said, I'm going to send this back to my graduate professors at Iowa State. Well, the learned gentlemen at Iowa State, they couldn't figure out what it was either. And so they finally sent it to the Harwell laboratories in Oxfordshire, England, for neutron activation, but they too failed to identify what this material was. He finally found a breakthrough by going to the then Soviet Academy of Sciences, where they were able, through some very, very sophisticated equipment, to finally come up and identify what it was. And they said that this is elements composed entirely of platinum group metals in a form previously unknown to modern science. Something very new and unusual was revealing itself. In 1988, David Hudson applied and received 11 patents on monatomic elements worldwide, filing both in the United States and in other countries. Now, he coined the term ORME, orbitally rearranged monatomic elements. What's really fascinating is ORME is also ancient Hebrew for the tree of life. All right? So, he's been working with various people, including Dr. Hal Puthoff. Some of you may remember that name. He was the one that was instrumental in developing remote viewing for the CIA and then the Army. He is a physicist who is now working on 0-point energy, which I'm sure some of you have heard about. All right, and I think that what we're doing here is closing in on the reality of all this. Here is just a rundown on some of the recent scientific papers. You'll notice they range from 1988, 89, 90, 92. Okay. You haven't heard about this because it's still cutting-edge physics, cutting-edge science, but it is the object of numerous scientific papers. And what they're finding out is that, and what we're actually talking about here, is the manipulation of energy at the atomic and even subatomic level, which is very exciting because this could lead to all kinds of things. They find by taking gold and melting it in a certain way, reducing it through heat, that they can actually come up with a white powdery substance that are these pure monatomic elements. Now, when they put the white powder on a scale, they find that the white powder lost 44% of its original weight. But even more astounding, the weighing pan weighed less than it did before they put the powder in it. This powder somehow is nullifying gravity. Now, this is now, what I'm telling you now is our cutting edge science and our deepest, darkest secret. I am now finding out that they have spent literally billions of dollars since the early 50s buying up universities, buying up scientific laboratories, putting out all kinds of papers. You go ask any reputable chemist or scientist or physicist and they're going to tell you anti-gravity, that's science fiction. This is a cover-up that's been laid on just as thickly and just as effectively as the UFO cover-up that's been laid on since 1947. Why? Because they want control of the technology. Because if it is truly anti-gravity and if this is the manipulation of energy at the atomic, subatomic level, this opens up all kinds of doors. We're talking free and limitless energy. 0 point energy, they estimate, put off, and other scientists say that in an empty, my hand right here, just the space within my hands, that's empty space, but it's not really, is it? There's atoms, there's neutrons flying around, there's all kinds of stuff in there. Even in the so-called vacuum of outer space, it's not truly empty. There's energy there. We know about the solar winds. We know about all this energy that flows through the universe. They are going for the building blocks of the universe. And they have estimated that right here, the space in my hands right here, if we could tap into the atomic, subatomic energy that's present right here, there is enough energy in my cupped hands to boil the oceans of the world. That's how much energy there's out there. And with that kind of energy and with using that for, they say that this is opening the door to free and limitless energy, faster than light speed travel. Jimmy, did you all see about a year ago some Canadian scientists said that they had broken the speed of light in the laboratory? Okay, we're getting there. All right, now by breaking the speed of light, now you're talking about interstellar travel. You're talking about perhaps either the creation or the location of wormholes, the folding of space, if you can manipulate the energy. This will take us to the stars. The thing I've heard all my life is, oh, they can't come here and we can't go there because by the time we crank up a rocket and fire it along and go there, it's going to take 150 years to get to the next galaxy or whatever, and you'll be dead and blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure that's true, but look how narrow-minded that is. That's based on our old rocket technology, and you all are here at an X conference wanting to know about UFOs, and every one of you know that there's not a UFO that's ever been sighted, found, looked at, talked about that uses ramjets. You know, they're ahead of us, okay? This is, when we see the space shuttle take off, that's window dressing. We watch that, okay? I suspect that there may even be a more secret and parallel space program going on, because while our attention is drawn to Cape Canaveral and we see the space shuttle blasting off amongst all that flame and smoke and everything else, over in the Okefenokee they're just lifting off with anti-gravity, okay? And you'll see some of this later on, but this is deep, dark stuff. We're not even supposed to be talking about this. But here's where it even gets better. By that kind of energy and by that kind of manipulation of the subatomic and the atomic level, they say this could open the door to interdimensional travel, time travel. But here's the thing that ought to really get you excited, and it has to do with health. They are theorizing, talking, and there are even people now experimenting with using this monatomic powder for health benefits. It's not a cure-all. What it does is clean up your DNA. Now we know that at the end of the DNA chain is what they call the telomerase caps, okay? And what this means is that all of y'all have been taught in science, and if you don't know this, you should know this. There is not a cell in your body today that was there 10 years ago. Your body replicates itself. Every few weeks, months, maybe a year, every cell in your body is regenerated. All right? But at a certain point, these telomerase caps pop, and they say, that's it. And they tell your DNA to stop replicating, and you stop reproducing those cells, and what happens? Oxidation sets in, all right? And then what happens? You grow old and you die. That's what it is. All we got to do, if the monatomic powder can truly repair the DNA, perhaps eliminate or alter these telomerase caps, then all of a sudden we're talking about longevity to the point of almost what we would consider immortality. That's right. Don't worry about Social Security. It's already bankrupt. I have never counted on Social Security. And all of a sudden, it's like, whoa, wait a minute. I remember in Baptist Sunday School, and they're telling about Methuselah, lived to be 850 years old or something, and these other patriarchs lived 750 years and whatever. And I used to kind of go, oh, come on, man, what a children's tale. But maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe they knew something about this powder. In fact, as you'll see, the evidence is they did. Because here, this is the old version of the atom. This is what I was taught, Walt Disney, our friend the atom, clean and limitless energy, fast and swift and safe and secure. And of course, that was before Love Canal and Chernobyl and everything else. Okay, now this I pulled out of a recent encyclopedia. This is the model of the atom they have now. So it's all changing. And I can see a lot of you all are my age or somewhere in there, everything we taught is out the window. It's all new stuff now. We're into a whole new age. We also see from this area of the atom, you've got the nucleus, which is at the center, and then you've got the electrons floating around. And look how much space there is within the atom. There's more space than there is particles or bits of matter. Now what they're finding on the monatomic gold also is that when they say orbitally rearranged, is that when you put this through the heating process and the smelting process and the processes of obtaining this monatomic gold, the nucleus of the atom changes form. And it changes, okay? This is why they couldn't identify what the material was. And it goes into kind of a dumbbell shape, and I found it very interesting to notice the similarity between this, the altered nucleus and the long-time symbol for infinity. See, we're beginning to gain more knowledge of what was going on. So now this is hard science. This is what's going on now. Fuel cell technology. I copied this off the United Technologies page, and look what you can read the whole thing for yourself. But the fuel cell is composed of an anode, negative electrode that repels electrons. So they're doing the very same thing with these fuel cells. Okay, they're playing around at the atomic and subatomic levels, shifting the neutrons around. As oxygen flows in the fuel cell cathode, another platinum coating helps the oxygen, protons, and electrons combine to produce pure water and heat. Individual fuel cells can then be combined into a fuel cell stack. Okay, so when they finally get ready to give you an alternative technology to petroleum, which won't be too long, all right, you're going to have to go in and have your fuel cells replenished, and in those fuel cells you're going to find gold and platinum metals and everything else. This is why they're getting a hold on it. And by the way, any of you that are into markets, commodities, etc., you know that the price of gold has been held artificially low for a number of years now. And the reason for that is that so the big guys can buy it all up cheap. And now it's beginning to go back up, okay? And it's going to go up and up. And once they start coming out with fuel cells, gold, silver is going to really become worth something. And if you're looking for an investment, it wouldn't be a bad investment. Okay. Interestingly enough, this is nothing new. This is the old alchemist, okay? And look, he's got the tree of life in his little jug there, you know. They knew. This information has been passed down through the secret societies. Anybody that's read my book, Ruled by Secrecy, you know what I'm talking about. This is ancient knowledge that has been passed along through the ancient mystery schools of Egypt and Greece, and then on through the secret societies like the Knights Templars, and then on into the Freemasons, and on into the groups today who are trying to run the world. I call them the secret societies. They are the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, and the inner core elite that runs both of those, which meet once a year under the name Bilderberger. They're so secretive they don't even really have a name. They call them Bilderbergers because they met at the Bilderberg Hotel in Holland. But these secrets have been passed along, but it's incomplete. They didn't know exactly how it worked. And what was the old alchemist trying to do? He was trying to transmit base metals into gold. Okay? He knew that you could alter gold, you could change it, you could shape it, you could do stuff with it. They just didn't quite have it down on how it really worked. And we can go back and we find that all the way through history that they are dealing with this stuff. The ancient Egyptians had shamana or vesves or whatever you call it, the white powder gold. And you notice they would offer these little cones of white powder to the pharaohs. In fact, in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, as the pharaoh goes through the steps to the afterlife, at each step he says, "What is it?" Which is really, really interesting. And so they received the cone that extended their life and that made them, put them in one with consciousness to the universe. We find in Exodus, when the children of Israel are going through the Sinai desert and they didn't have anything to eat, when the dew had gone up, doesn't mean that there was in the dew, it just said when the dew has gone up. That means after the morning came and it got light and they got up, there was, on the face of the wilderness, there was a fine flake-like thing, fine as hoarfrost on the ground. And they saw it and they said, "What is it?" And he said, "It's the bread the Lord has given you to eat." So Moses provided them with this white powder that they made into little cakes and little breads, and they ate it. And they said, "What is it?" And well, in ancient Hebrew, "what is it" translates to manna. This was the manna from heaven. Was it the white powder gold? Certainly took care of them in their little sojourn through the wilderness. So Moses must have known how to produce the monatomic gold powder. And by the way, when he comes back down, again we read in Exodus 32, he comes down from the mountain with the tablets, and the children of Israel, they know there's something magical, spiritual, holy about gold, so they've taken all their gold, melted it down, and turned it into a golden calf, and they're worshiping it. And it really made Moses mad. Moses' anger burned hot. And he threw the tables out of his hand. He broke them at the foot of the mountain. And then he took the calf which they had made, burned it with fire, ground it to a powder, and made the people of Israel drink it. What? Now, wait a minute. If he just melted gold down and made them drink it, it's going to kill them, right? No, he melted it down, and he made it, ground it into a powder. It's the monatomic gold powder, okay? Now, where'd he get it? 1904, Sir William Petrie, the famed British archaeologist, travels to the south of the Sinai to Mount Horeb, which is also known as the Mount of Moses, and he finds what he described as an ancient Egyptian temple. And in there is a smelter, okay? They were doing metallurgy work here. And I've talked to some people who visited this place, and they said within sight are some mountain ranges where there are gold mines. So this is where Moses was producing the manna, the white powder. And when Petrie discovered this place in 1904, when they pulled up the flagstones, what did they find underneath all this? White powder. But this was 1904. He didn't know what that was, so they just left it open, and pretty soon the wind blew it all away. You know, it was some dust or something. They didn't know what it was. All right, so apparently this is where they were making the monatomic gold powder, which not only gave the children of Israel sustenance, but probably increased their age, increased their health. All right, where did all that knowledge come from? All roads lead to Sumer, okay, in Mesopotamia, which is, of course, modern-day Iraq. So how did the Egyptians know all about this? Very simple. It all came from Sumer. Again, go back and study your Bible history and you find that the patriarch of both the Jews and of the Arabs is the patriarch Abraham. Now, Abraham was not a Jew. He was not even a Semite. And he was certainly not some poor guy traveling around the desert with a camel in a tent. He came from Ur of the Chaldees. Chaldea was simply an ancient term for Mesopotamia or Sumer. And Ur is the city there in not too far from Baghdad. So he was an Iraqi in modern terms. And he traveled all the way up through, there's a series of cities up there, all named for Abraham's relatives. So they were a dynastic, powerful family in ancient Mesopotamia. And all the way up to Haran. And then Abraham made his way into Egypt, bringing with him the ancient knowledge. And this is where the Egyptians' mystery schools got started. Now, these are, what I'm telling you is obviously hitting the high points and kind of a generalization, but this is the way it worked. And of course, Moses, according to all accounts, and I won't go into, well, I might. He obviously picked up and learned a lot of these secrets from these Egyptian mystery schools, and this is where he picked up the ancient white powder. All of human history, it certainly at least in the Western civilization, all emanates from modern-day Iraq, between the Tigris-Euphrates River. Interestingly enough, even old Bible scholars had determined that between the Tigris and Euphrates River is probably, they had estimated that was probably the location of the fabled Eden. Okay? And so then when you go back and read the ancient Sumerian tablets and they're talking about the Anunnaki who came to Earth, what did they call their colony there at the mouth of the Tigris-Euphrates River? Eden. Hello? Obviously, the ancient Sumerians had some very, very advanced knowledge because as we see on this stele, they've got correctly depicted the number and the relative sizes of the planets of our solar system. And yet Uranus was not known to modern man until 1781. Neptune was discovered in 1846, and Pluto was not discovered until 1930. But the ancient Sumerians knew about it thousands of years ago. Okay, I could go on in that vein, but I think you all get the idea. We also know about the Baghdad battery, right? They discovered this. It's been dated to about 3,000 years ago. And yet when you put grape juice in the vase and you put the copper tube in, a little thing in there, it produces half a volt of electricity. This is how they're able to produce enough electricity to start electroplating all the way back there. And again, this was not that they were smart and had suddenly developed something. It was that they had remnants of even earlier, more powerful technology. And it all comes back to the Sumerian tablets. This was the world's first writing. They would take a stylus and they would press in this cuneiform symbology into clay and then bake it and turn it to rock, and as a result there's about 500,000 of these tablets still in existence, and that's the ones we know about, and only about 20% of them have been translated. And they predate the Bible by at least 4,000 years. In fact, what you find is many of the same Bible stories are obviously nothing more than a reworking of the ancient Sumerian tablets. In the tablets, let me see if I've got no. In the tablets, we find out that we have the story of the flood. And it's the same story, okay? The God tells his worshiper to build an ark, tells him to put bitumen in it to seal it, and that there's going to be a flood, and get ready, and the flood and the ark rides out the flood. They let off birds, and finally one does not come back, so they know there's land somewhere, and guess where it ends up? On Mount Ararat. Same story we find in the Bible, only two differences. Excuse me. Two differences. In the Bible, the guy's name is Noah, and in the Sumerian tablets, his name is Upnarpishtim. The other difference, and I find this very significant because, again, harking back to Bible school, And I was told that they took 2 of every animal on the ark. And I'm going, wait a minute. You're going to get the lamb to lie down with the lion, you know? What are you going to feed them? Where are all those animals going to go to the bathroom, you know? I finally figured that one out. It was on the poop deck. That was pretty bad. But in the Sumerian version, we find that the Lord tells his follower, take the essence of every living thing. And since in the Sumerian tablets we already find that they obviously had knowledge of cloning, genetics, etc., then all of a sudden, whoa, now it makes sense. Instead of a boatload of animals, you've got an ark with a little closet full of DNA samples, okay? And that way they can repopulate the earth when the waters go down. Makes a lot more sense. And of course, most of you are familiar with the story that's put in these tablets. Zachariah Sitchin has done a magnificent job of popularizing a lot of this. What's really interesting is that people say, well, he may not have got his translation correct. It's not a question of translation. If you want to read the story of Enlil and Enki and the Anunnaki and all this stuff, you don't have to read Sitchin. Go to the Encyclopedia Britannica. It's all in there, okay? But it's under Sumerian mythology, all right? And that's because when the ancient tablets, when these tablets were first discovered in the 1800s and they began to translate them, and they were talking about coming from the heavens to the earth and colonizing and taking and mating the Anunnaki with an earth primitive and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they had no concept of what they were talking about. This was before they had heavier than air flight. They certainly didn't know about space travel. They barely knew about other worlds. It was just totally alien to them, okay? So they said, oh, this is their mythology, and these are their gods. The Sumerians never called them gods. They just called them the Anunnaki, those who came down from the heavens and landed on the earth, okay? This interpretation of mythology is what got started in the 1800s. Well, it ended up in the textbooks, so it's still there. All that Zachariah Sitchin and Dr. Horn and Turnage and various other people that are now studying this, there's a growing number of them, the only thing they're doing, they're not changing the translations at all. All they're saying is, hey, maybe these aren't just made-up mythological stories. Maybe these folks were telling us what they knew to be the truth. So it's just a click of the mindset, okay? We know about ancient Gilgamesh. And we know, and any of you, you might want to go back and read the saga of Gilgamesh. It's really kind of a fascinating story. It would make a great science fiction movie, okay? He was the legendary Sumerian king who, with his non-human companion, Enkidu, and they set off on this huge adventure, very comparable to Ulysses, to go and locate the ancient gods so they could learn the secret of immortality. And Gilgamesh, by the way, was famous for saying that he was only 1/3 human. He was 2/3 of the gods. He probably was one of those Nephilim that we read about in the Bible, that was the offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men. All right? Now, it's all there. You know, it just depends on whether you want to pay any attention to it or not. Okay. Now, this leads us to recent discoveries. Starting in 1999, continuing up through early January, February of 2003, they're making amazing new discoveries in Iraq. They think they have found the tomb of Gilgamesh. For the longest time, they figured he was just, again, a legendary, kind of like King Arthur, you know, just a mythical figure. But now they're beginning to think, no, we think he really was a real person and all this was very real. This is what they've located under the Euphrates River, and they think it may be the tomb of Gilgamesh. Along with this, they were making other amazing new discoveries. I say amazing, that's what the news coverage called them. All right, this came from ABC News, came from Scientific America, and various other establishment media. And guess who's doing it all? French and German archaeological teams, okay? And I find that very, very fascinating, because who were the two countries that most opposed our invasion of Iraq? France and Germany. So they're gaining even more tablets, more knowledge. Could they be gaining knowledge of the monatomic elements that gives us the secret of anti-gravity and limitless free fuel and longevity? Perhaps. Perhaps somebody here in the Pentagon or at Langley either knew or maybe just suspected that maybe they were gaining some of this knowledge. Now, if they did make these discoveries, did find new tablets, if it did have some of the secrets of unlocking the monatomic elements, where would they have taken all that? They took it to the Iraqi National Museum in Baghdad. And you can figure that probably they stored it all away in the basement until they could catalog it and examine it, study it, and get it ready for exhibition. So that takes us now to April of 2003, and in late March, you know, we invade Iraq. Now, I was in the Army, and I've been studying military tactics all my life. The typical military tactic is you take the biggest bulk of your force and you attack the weakest point of the enemy, you punch through, you go for an objective, you capture your objective, then you consolidate your winnings, and then you prepare for the next stage of the assault and you move on to a new objective. We didn't do that. We went against total military tactics. We sent columns in and we made a beeline for Baghdad. And this is why we're still having problem over there, because we failed to pacify the countryside. And what happened in Baghdad? The Iraqi National Museum was sacked, okay, by organized looters. Yes, there was a crowd of people, and I'm sure there were some street people that they grabbed and said, come on in, grab what you want to, but that was a cover, okay? Number one, museum directors from all around the world had already contacted the Pentagon and gotten assurances that we would protect these antiquities in the Iraqi National Museum. This was not done. In fact, the one instance where some museum official managed to get some U.S. soldiers, got them over there, they fired their guns in the air, ran off the looters for about 15 minutes, and then they got orders to pull out, leaving the museum wide open. Meanwhile, thousands of Iraqis are standing around shouting, don't do that, don't do that, that's our national heritage. All right? And whoever went into the National Museum, the whole thing stinks, okay? Guards were suspiciously missing. They had keys to the vaults. They knew exactly what they were after. They bypassed expensive-looking fakes, okay? And the main thing is they went right to the basement and looted the basement. This is just, I just thought this was interesting. This was what we were handing out over there. Here's the Arabic version. And over here it says, coalition forces do not wish to harm the noble people of Iraq. To ensure your safety, avoid areas occupied by military personnel. In other words, don't come around us and we won't shoot you. All right? But this is what they were handing out. And this is what the museum looked like after this band of people got through with it. Over 170,000 items were looted out of the museum. Many of these have now been returned, but these were the ones from the upper galleries. These were the ones from the public exhibits and all like that.
Jim, there are 80,000 tablets missing.
Yes, yes.
Nobody's talked about that.
Well, I am in just a minute. Interestingly enough, you notice that we did mount guards at the Ministry of Oil. Now, we guarded that, but not the museum, despite warnings before the war, before the invasion, to please protect this and assurances from the Pentagon that we would. Now, this is Marine Colonel Matthew Bogdanos, and he was Deputy Director of the Joint Interagency Coordination Group that investigated the looting of the museum. The basement is what we've been calling the inside job, and I'll say it forever like a mantra. It is inconceivable to me that the basement was breached, the items stolen without an intimate knowledge of the museum. And from there, about 10,000 pieces were taken. We've only recovered 650 approximately. This is what we were after, the ancient secrets. We got to keep it. Got to keep it from our enemies, and we got to keep it from you, because this gets back to the UFO secrecy. The people in charge, and I'm not talking about President Bush or any of those people. Those are political front men. I'm talking the people who are really running this planet, and they're deep within the secret societies. They don't care if you know about aliens. They don't care about that. What they care about is that if you know UFOs are real and that aliens are real, then you know that alternative technology is real. And why should you be paying ever-increasing prices for gasoline, petroleum products that are polluting our world if you know there is alternative technology? Let's go back again and look again at another historical thing. We all know that by the mass media that Saddam Hussein believed himself the reincarnated Nebuchadnezzar. Well, then that means we probably ought to take another look at King Nebuchadnezzar. What was he doing? Well, King Nebuchadnezzar was trying to reach the gods, trying to contact the gods, the ancient gods, the Anunnaki. Probably, okay? So how'd he do that? He built a tower of gold, which somehow has come down and is translated as the fiery furnace. So now we've got what we got. We got a furnace, we got heat, and we got gold. The same thing that we now know, remember the scientific papers, that now they can alter the structure of these metals through a smelting and heating process. So they knew this, they just didn't quite know how to make it work. So he builds this artifact of gold, and he sends his people in there, but they die, okay? Probably because there's radiation, there's something in there that they're not making it work right. So then we see the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, 3 of the Hebrew priests that he brings in. He said, make it work. And they said, no, you're not our king. You don't even worship our God, so we're not going to work for you. He said, okay, then I'm going to throw you in there, and you're going to die, or you're going to make it work. So they threw him in there, but they didn't just chunk him in. First it says that they donned their hats, coats, and other garments. Well, what's that? Radiation suits or whatever? And then to me, which is absolutely amazing about this account is, after they throw him in there, Nebuchadnezzar doesn't even want to go near it. So he asked his people, he said, are they in there? Yeah, they're in there. He said, are they dead? He said, no, they're moving around in there. He said, not only that, but didn't you throw 3 in there? And he said, yeah. He said, well, there's a 4th person in there. And he said, well, who's that? And they said, well, looks like the Son of God. And then the story ends. Wait a minute. The Son of God in the Old Testament? Who's that? What happened to him? We don't know. And this maybe be the whole crux of the whole thing. We've got these stories. They came down word of mouth for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years. Finally, only about 300 years before the time of Jesus were they written down. And now we've got these vague written accounts, and who knows what they actually mean, you know? There are certain sociological, theological, spiritual messages that I think are very valid and that we all hold dear, but as far as absolute details and absolute history, we don't know, because it's all been so garbled. Now, are we the first ones to start figuring all this out? No. The Nazis were way ahead. Towards the end of the war, when we overran Germany, what did we find on the drawing boards? Flying saucers. And they weren't powered by jets. They were powered by electromagnetic propulsion systems. And this fellow over here is SS General Hans Kammler. He was the guy who, towards the end of the war, was taking over all of the leading research and development, the high-tech stuff that the Nazis were using. Even Albert Speer in his memoirs lamented the fact that he was out of the loop. He was kept in the dark. His job became just keeping the war production factories going, okay? Kammler was the one in charge of the cutting-edge technology. And what we all have been told and what we believe is that their cutting-edge technology was rocketry. We know they had the V1 because they used it. We know they had the V2 because they used it. We even know that they had plans for a 3-stage rocket called the New York rocket. I guess that tells you what that target was, okay? They also had a rocket on the drawing board called the Mars rocket, okay? They were really into it. But again, their deepest, darkest secret was the manipulation of energy. And what is now being established, and there are some works and some writings about this, is that apparently they had built a primitive particle accelerator in western Poland, and they were beginning to mess with the manipulation of energy at the atomic and subatomic level. We do know that Kammler told Werner von Braun, who was trying, after they shifted all their rocket research from Peenemünde to Bavaria, and von Braun wanted to hurry up and get back into testing with the V2, and Kammler told him that he was going to hand over the rocket scientists and the V2s to the Western allies in exchange for freedom, in exchange for no prosecution for war crimes, because he was in charge of all the slave labor that was producing all this technology. And so we know that was his plan. And then a little later he told Werner von Braun, "You're not going to see me again." And sure enough, he disappears from the pages of history. And there's various stories about what may have happened to him, but there seems to be some credible evidence that he was seen alive in the United States in the 50s and 60s. Chances are he came under Operation Paperclip, which most of you are probably familiar with. But he did not hand over the V2 program. Okay? We captured that. When we overran Bavaria, they were all still sitting there, and we just scooped them up, and we had it. Okay? And it was a race at that point between us and the Russians to capture all the German rocket scientists. I can still remember the old joke from the 50s about the American and the Russian arguing with each other, saying, "Well, our German scientists are better than your German scientists," you know? All right, so if Hans Kammler did survive the war, and if he did go on, and if he did become part of Paperclip, what did he hand over? He handed over the secrets of the manipulation of energy and anti-gravity. And this, for a brief period of time in the early 50s, started hitting the public. This is part of an old article that was out of some magazines talking about the gravity engines are coming, okay? And then we got a quote from Lawrence D. Bell. "We're already working on nuclear fuels and equipment to cancel out gravity." Bill Lear, "All matter within the ship would be influenced by the ship's gravitation only." So there's hints that they already had this anti-gravity in the early 50s. And in fact, y'all are familiar, I'm sure, with the General Twining memo, where he says the phenomena, talking about UFOs, is real and not visionary or imaginative, okay? But over here, in this section over here, and I think I've got a bigger one, it says it is possible with the present U.S. knowledge, provided extensive detailed development is undertaken to construct a pilotless aircraft which has the general description of the object in subparagraph A. Well, subparagraph A is where he says the phenomena is something real and not visionary or fictitious. In other words, he's saying we had the technology to develop a UFO. And they had it because they had anti-gravity. But they still are working with that. Obviously, two things. They either have not perfected it, or they have perfected it and they feel that it would be so revolutionary that it would upset the monopolies and the status quo, so we're not getting it. Now here we have a picture of the Avro, because early on they announced that Britain and the United States were going into joint development of the Avro car, which was a flying saucer, and that it was going to be produced in Western Canada. I always find that really, really interesting, because when June of 1947 and when Kenneth Arnold had his famous sighting, and said that they skipped through the sky like saucers skipping over water. And by the way, remember that. He never said they looked like saucers. He wasn't talking about their shape. He was talking about their flight characteristics. And where did that happen? Up near Mount Rainier. And where did they all go off to? Back into Western Canada. So, but then later on, about 1956, they finally rolled out the Avro car, and it kind of rolled around and wobbled a little bit, you know, and they said, it just didn't work, and they shut it all down, and this is when the curtain came down on anti-gravity. But we now have some pictures that I had not ever seen before, that they say this was some stuff that was flying in the 60s, and the question is, was this using jets? Or did this lift off? There's even rumors and stories today that the new stealth bomber, you know, I've had flight engineers tell me, I don't see how that thing can fly, you know? And so there's stories that they have jets on this thing, and it kind of takes off, and there's some jets going, and everybody says, well, it took off, and then once it's up there, they kick in something else, okay? Other more exotic propulsion. So we obviously have some things going on now. The non-existent aurora, and how about that? You know, the aurora, everybody knows my story about the 1897 crash in Aurora, Texas. Where do they get these names? And that leads us to the main question, of course, is, are they them or are they us? Is this all this new stuff that we have, these triangular shaped craft, these anti-gravity type things, you know, is this just human ingenuity or reverse engineering? And is this based on the recovery of ancient technology that is now going to be our future technology? Okay? So that's that one. Hope that gave you something to think about. We still got plenty of time, so now we're going to talk about remote viewing. If I can, well, I better have, pardon me while I come do it myself. Okay, in 1995, we sent up the Mars Observer, and just as it was going into orbit around Mars, it disappeared. And by the way, I guess he left. What was it? Hey, Dick, was it the Beagle that they lost? Which? Beagle 2. All right, Beagle 2. Same thing happened to it. It got up there and was about to go into orbit, and all of a sudden they lost that one too. Yeah. Just disappeared. And there's been other shots too that I won't go into, but they, you know, we can find everything in space. They have cataloged like 1,500 pieces of space junk up there, including, as I remember, a screwdriver that was dropped by a Soviet cosmonaut. So, you know, they can locate the screwdriver, and we know everything that's floating around up there, but we send stuff up there, and then we can't find it. It's gone, which is really fascinating. So when the Mars Observer was lost in 95 and the Beagle 2, and everybody's going, what happened to it? I'm immediately thinking of what I learned when I began to research remote viewing, which was the same thing that brought down the Phobos 2. This is a drawing made by a military remote viewer that showed this object circled in red coming off the planet. What they said happened to the Phobos 2 was that this was a Russian space probe, and as it got into the Martian atmosphere and was getting ready to try to make a landing this object flew off the surface of Mars, approached it, and scanned it with some kind of electromagnetic scanning device. Yes?
They have something to say. I saw the European news release of the Govt 2 incident, and it's amazing. The satellite actually photographed an underground city. And
Yeah.
a lot of people had the Prophet inversion. Dr. Hertog was giving
Mm-hmm.
Prophet inversion. Everybody caused him on.
Mm-hmm.
There were a few of us in the audience, and one was from NASA who saw this film leak, and they had the technology on the satellite that actually photographed underground.
That's right.
They got a whole underground city and showed that.
Well, they are slowly leaking this information too. We're in a conditioning program right now. I mean, 10 years ago, Mars was a dead world. And now all of a sudden, we did find this, and yeah, there is a blue sky, and yeah, there are some storms up there, and yeah, there's some green belts, and yeah, all those poles, they're not just frozen methane, they actually are water, and we're just slowly being conditioned in the idea of life. But my point is to get into the remote viewing here is they actually saw this thing rise up, come out and approach it. They said the analogy was the tugboats coming out to the Queen Mary. This was not a hostile act. They came out, they thought they were going to guide it in, they scanned it and realized this isn't us. Okay, but when they scanned it, it blew the onboard computer, and they lost all their guidance, and the Phobos 2 then just spiraled in and probably burned up the Martian atmosphere, which is probably what happened to the Mars Observer and the Beagle 2. All right, now, as the lady mentioned, the Russians actually showed us one of the last photographs taken from the Phobos 2, and look at the similarity between the object that was approaching and the object as drawn by military remote viewers. All right? Remote viewing, I'll make this point now and I'll make it later. Remote viewing may be our best tool to try to penetrate the extraterrestrial agenda. But it has to be done properly with the proper people and under the proper protocols, because there are too many charlatans out there right now. When I first got involved with remote viewing, I told them, I said, well, I can already see what's going to happen. I said, today we got Madame Zodiac and her palm reading, and I said, as soon as this hits the public, it's going to be Madame Zodiac and her remote viewing. And that's exactly what we have. So you have to be very careful with this. Another one that went up was the Titan IV. And this is right out of Space News. Sterling, Air Force Colonel Frank Sterling says he was told that the Air Force video of the launch shows an unidentified object apparently striking the Titan at an altitude of 110,000 feet shortly before it blew up. Okay? Well, what's that? What in the world was that? Well, some of the remote viewers call it a buckyball. They said it's a multifaceted object. It's not very big. It's basically about as big as your fist or a hand grenade. Kind of looks like a hand grenade, and they're faceted, so when the grenade blows up, you got shrapnel and pieces going every which way. And this is what they saw. And they said these things are up in orbit. They're so small that they're not really going to get picked up on radar, but every time something goes up that they don't want, then these things zoom down and boom, it's gone. and it's interesting because I noticed even back years ago when I was working for the newspaper, they would be announcing that they were putting up communication satellites and they're going to have a space launch and they're going to put up some scientific studies and stuff, and those things seem to work just fine. But then they'd have a news story saying they're going to have a launch next week, but that's all we're going to say about it because it has military applications and this is national security. And those are the ones that seem to just get lost. Gee, we don't know what happened to it. Probably got hit by a buckyball. This is George Byers from New Mexico, an executive who got real interested in remote viewing. And he ended up remote viewing. He's one of the ones that saw the buckyballs. You'll see some of the story in my book, Sci-Spies, which was originally written. I got onto remote viewing in 1992. This was when it was still a very, very deep, dark, secret government project. And I thought, holy cow, what a story, what a scoop, you know, because in my mind it was either real or it was not real. If it's not real, what a waste of the taxpayers' money. This needs to come out. If it is real, holy cow, this is an evolutionary leap for mankind. So I dug into it. I got a contract with a major New York publisher, and it's beginning to be, this is beginning to get real old because this has happened to me 3 times now. Had a contract, produced the book, even had 3 people going on the record, violating their secrecy oaths, saying, yes, we were part of this, this is what's going on, passed the legal vetting, got to within about 2 weeks of going to the printer, and they canceled it. And now, later, I put it all together. Within 2 weeks of them canceling my book in summer of 1995, the CIA suddenly orders a study of remote viewing. Okay? And then within another week or 2, the story broke in the supermarket tabloids. CIA uses psychics to spy on the Soviets. Well, now, let me tell you, this is typical methodology. If you want to keep from getting accused of suppressing news, but you don't want that news out, what do? You put it in the supermarket tabloids, because then you can say, well, heck, it was on the front page of the National Enquirer. But who reads the National Enquirer? Hardly anybody. And if it's on the front page of the National Enquirer, is any legitimate news organization going to pick it up? No. It's the kiss of death. So that is how they cover up, and that another way that they manage the news. Because in some of those stories in those tabloids are legitimate stories. But the problem is, the story on the next page is, you know, I became pregnant with Elvis's baby by a space alien. And it destroys the whole credibility, and anybody, none of the intelligentsia is ever going to touch anything if it's been in the tabloids. And then a few weeks later, they come back with their report, and it was 2 people, Jessica Utz, a statistician, and Ray Hyman, who is a notorious debunker and had tried to get the remote viewing program stopped for years. And of course, he says there's nothing to it. And interestingly enough, Jessica Utz didn't go along. She said, well, statistically, there is something going on here, but we don't really know, can't really explain it. And the CIA, amazingly enough, I can't remember any other time before or after that they ever voluntarily broke open one of their secret programs, but they actually put out a press release and said, yeah, we were using this remote viewing, but we don't think we're getting much good out of it, so we're going to discontinue the program. Just thought you'd like to know. They don't do that. And that story appeared on the front page of the Washington Post and on the New York Times, but I want to tell you, it didn't go anywhere else. I watched all the papers in Texas, and it never hit there. And if any of y'all, you know, and it hit 1 or 2 days and went away. And there's still plenty of people that have never even heard of remote viewing. In fact, before I go into too much detail, how many of y'all feel like you really know most about remote viewing? Okay, y'all are pretty up to speed. Good, then we'll kind of hurry through this. It all began not 1972, that's a typo, it was 1992. And we got Ed Dames and we got General Stubblebine and Stephen Schwartz at the Tree 4 conference in Atlanta. And this is where I got onto it, because Dames gets up and starts talking about UFOs, and very matter-of-factly, they come from here and they go to there and they're doing this and they're doing that, and I'm going, wow, here's a guy with military credentials who acts like he really knows what he's talking about. And that's how I got onto the whole remote viewing thing. Now, what happened here is he was not a loose cannon. He was not talking out of school. John Alexander was also there. Stubblebine, his immediate boss, the head of the Army Intelligence Security Command, was sitting right beside him. They knew what he was doing. And what this was a disinformation program, okay? They're going to let Dames come forward and start talking about remote viewing, because they knew that a lot of the remote viewers in the military were retiring, getting out. Joe McMoneagle was beginning to work on his book, okay? Dave Morehouse was beginning to work on his book. They knew they were all going to be talking. So they knew they weren't going to be able to keep the secret of remote viewing any longer, so they wanted to put it out with their spin, so they're going to let Dames do it, because they knew in the next breath he'd be talking about Martians hibernating under the desert of New Mexico. And they figure this way it won't be very credible, and so, you know, everybody will blow it off, and yeah, it'll be there, and but nobody will pay much attention to it. Well, I got involved in it, and I'm a good reporter. I didn't just take their word for it. I went back and I did a book. You'll see in Sci-Spies that I went back to the Bible. I went back to, in the Old Testament, we find a prophetess by the name of Deborah. While the children of Israel are fighting their way through the wilderness there, they come upon and they're getting ready to tackle an army about twice the size of their own. And Deborah has a vision, and she goes to the leader of the Israelite army and says, here's where the enemy is, here's their disposition, and here's their plans. And based on her visionary information, they were able to whip this army that was twice their size. Deborah was, as far as I know, the world's first military remote viewer. But what really got remote viewing going was psychic discoveries behind the Iron Curtain that came out about 1970. This was by Sheila Ostrander and Lynn Schroeder. They had traveled extensively through Russia and mostly in Eastern Europe, and had found out that there was a tremendous interest and study going on about psychic phenomena. At this time in the United States, that was a ha-ha subject, you know, even worse than UFOs are now. People are starting to pay attention now to UFOs, but you know how it was 20 years ago. Well, this is the way it was about psychic stuff. But we were in the middle of a Cold War. And so there was, their book was very popular to the public, but as far as the leadership goes, it was like, oh, this is garbage. Except deep within the halls of the Pentagon and of Langley, there were people who were going, you know, I think this is all BS, but if the commies are doing it, we got to do it, because we can't have a psychic gap. So they actually took a little bit of money, a few $100,000, nothing to speak of, and they threw it at some research into psychic phenomena. And before long, they had Ingo Swann, Dr. Hal Puthoff, Russell Targ, and they were working out at Menlo Park at Stanford Research Institute, and it began under the CIA. You can follow the chronology here. And it was Ingo Swann who actually coined the term remote viewing. And again, that was not actually referring to the phenomena itself, but simply to describe an experiment. They also came up with coordinate remote viewing, and this started off literally coordinate. What they would do was get coordinates, longitude, latitude coordinates, and then they would give the viewer those coordinates and then see what the viewer picked up about those coordinates. And for example, if the viewer said, well, everything's real white and it's cold, and oh, I see a big furry animal and I think it's a bear and he's all white, well, okay, bingo. They check the coordinates and sure enough that's at the North Pole. Then they go, oh, that's a hit. So that's how I got started. Today they still call it coordinate remote viewing, but they do not use coordinates. The coordinates do not mean the coordinates. This took me forever to figure out this whole idea about coordinates, and all I can tell you is this. The problem with science, and the reason science has not fully embraced remote viewing, is that they can't make it fit to the scientific method. The scientific method says you start off with a hypothesis, and then you test it, and replicate it, duplicate it, and if you can get it to repeat itself over and over again, then it becomes a law, or at least it's established, and now that's fact. In this case, they know it works, they can prove it works, but they don't have a hypothesis. They don't know how it works. And as a result, it throws them all off, and that's why most mainstream scientists don't want to deal with it. But the best idea of how it works is simply this, and again, we're back to the basic component of the universe, which is energy at the subatomic level. And interestingly enough, the concept's already out there. It's Luke Skywalker's The Force, okay? Or if you want to, you could go back to Einstein's unified field theory, all right? The entire universe is nothing but energy. And within that energy, there's concentrations of energy that we call matter. But it's all part of the same matrix. It's all part of the same thing. So you could think of the whole universe as a giant spider web all interconnected, okay? Now when you have a thought, that thought is energy. And that thought is on the grid. How many times have you all had an idea and said, boy, that's a good idea, I bet I can make money on that, but you didn't do anything and nothing happened, and then a few years later somebody's making a lot of money doing the same thing you thought about? All right, there are no secrets. Everything, once there's a thought, it's an energy form, it goes on the grid. And anybody with the receptivity can pick it up. Now, so it's not a question of who comes up with the idea. The real deal is who actually does something with it. That's the thing. So the next time you get one of those ideas, don't just say, well, that's a good idea. Start doing something with it, and maybe you'll make yourself a fortune. You have a thought, it goes out on the energy grid, okay? So what happens is that if I'm the tasker and I want a viewer to go and remote view something, we'll say I want him to remote view the Eiffel Tower. Well, I can't say go remote view the Eiffel Tower, because immediately if I tell you all that, a lot of you right now, you got a picture of the Eiffel Tower in your mind, right? Because you've either been there, or you've seen films, or you've seen pictures. Steve, by the way, would you send somebody in to give me the cut sign, because I have no idea what the time is here. 5 to 1, so we got 30 minutes. Well, we're doing good, okay. All right, so if I say go remote view the Eiffel Tower, you already know what I'm talking about, and you've already got a mental picture. That's not remote viewing, by the way. And in fact, let me give you this example. Everybody shut your eyes. Everybody sit quietly. Relax. Shake your shoulders around a little bit. Take deep breaths. Okay, now envision a South Sea island, okay? The beautiful blue water lapping up on the beach, and the sun glinting off the yellow sand. And as you mentally turn and look, you see palm trees swaying in the breeze. You can even hear the seagulls flying overhead. Everybody that's getting that vision, raise your hand. Yeah. Okay, you can open your eyes. That is not remote viewing. That's daydreaming and mental pictures, okay? Understand the difference. Okay, they did all of this work, and they actually were producing some phenomenal stuff, such as this sketch that was done by someone who only got a coordinate, and you can see how it matches up with the airport that was their target. I'm not sure. Here's some of the leading luminaries, people that were all working in it. And this is Remote Viewing Central. I actually went up there and took pictures of where they were actually doing all this grill flame work. This has all been torn down now. This was an old bakery school during World War II up at Fort Meade. And they had, it was really incredible, because here you can see these little kind of little ramshackle old wooden frame buildings, and yet you go up there and they got this steel door on there with this super, you know, key lock and everything. And it was kind of funny, because I thought, what's with this super security door? When you get this old wooden building, you'd probably kick a hole in it, you know? But this is where they were doing all the work, because once the CIA, what happened was the CIA started off with the experimentation, and they funded it. But about 1975, the CIA got in a lot of trouble because of the Church Committee when they found out that they were plotting to assassinate world leaders, not to mention John Kennedy, but they didn't mention that. And all of this stuff, so they decided they were going to drop all their more controversial subjects and programs, and so they dropped the remote viewing program. And who picked it up but the United States Army, okay, through the Intelligence Security Command. And they not only continued the experimentation and the scientific study, they actually created an operational unit of about 24 people that were actually using remote viewing to find out things, to gather information. And they did it from this place right here. Now, back to how it works. So we've got this universal energy grid, and any thought that goes out there is on the grid, and if you're receptive enough, you can pick it up. So if I want somebody to remote view the Eiffel Tower, I can't tell them go remote view the Eiffel Tower, so I give them a coordinate number. It's not a true coordinate, it's just a number, but they call it a coordinate number because it grew out of the old coordinate experimentations. Now this number, which is generally a 2 4-digit numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, in any combination. That number in and of itself is meaningless. But as the tasker, when I say, I want you to go look up 21456398. In my mind, I know that that represents the Eiffel Tower, and it goes out on the grid. Now you, as a remote viewer, when you relax yourself, you go into what they call the cool down period. You attune yourself to the force or to the grid, and when you get that number, subconsciously your mind goes to the target, and you begin to get sensory impressions, maybe sometimes visual, sometimes auditory, sometimes, who knows, tactile. And you begin, but it's a very, very subtle thing. It's a deep gut feeling type thing, okay? How many of y'all have had the experience of suddenly thinking, gee, I think my mom's going to call today. And then all of a sudden she calls, you know? That's what I'm talking about. It's that little subtle feeling you just know, or maybe you've had an experience where you're walking down a street kind of by yourself at night and it's kind of dark, and all of a sudden you get this creepy feeling like, you know, this is not good. I shouldn't be here. And if you're smart, then you turn around and you head somewhere else, okay? Or you head for a lighted area or something like that. This is what I'm talking about. This is this almost subconscious signal. And this is where remote viewing begins to happen. They were even early on in 1991, they used, this is the Washington Times, they were using the remote viewers to try to locate Saddam Hussein's hidden weapons caches. And they drew out some of the chemical weapons that they had found, and they were quite successful. These are some of the name changes that it went through: Grill Flame, Center Lane, Eagle Claw, Dragoon Absorbed, Sun Street, and Stargate. So you'll hear all of these used interchangeably. It's the same thing, same group, same thing, same program. They just had different designations. Every time they were about to get found out or thought they might get in trouble, they changed the name, just like every other federal agency. Everybody remember the old Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, the BNDD. Oh, it got so corrupt that it was getting to be a real embarrassment. So did they clean it up? No, they just changed the name to the Drug Enforcement Administration, you know, or agency, and now it's okay. Same people, same stuff, same corruption. They just changed the name. That's what the government does. They were never officially targeted to look at UFOs, and yet here's something that I know y'all find interesting. Every single military trained remote viewer at one time or another had face-to-face confrontation with UFOs. They know they're there, they know they're real. Some of them will talk about it, some of them won't talk about it. Paul Smith was pretty funny. I was interviewing him one time. I was trying to nail him down, and he was really waffling. He finally admitted, well, yes, I did see some esoteric targets, some anomalous targets, you know, and that's about as far as he'd go. But they've all had the experience, and that was why they canceled my book, frankly. They knew that because I brought in the UFO factor, and it was too credible, and they didn't want people to hear that in a credible way. Pat Price was one of the best remote viewers they ever had. He was a natural remote viewer and had been a police detective and had been extraordinarily successful in his career because, as he told the people out at SRI, he would get these gut feelings, these hunches, and he'd follow them, and they'd always turn out to be true. Well, at one point he showed up and he said, hey, I did a little remote viewing on my own, and guess what? I located 4 alien bases on this planet. You can see they're all in their mountains. One's in the Pyrenees, one's in Zimbabwe, one's in Australia, and one's in Alaska. And he even gave descriptions of what happened at these bases. Well, of course, there was no what they call feedback. There was no way of knowing if this is true or not, so they just stuck it in the files and said, well, that's interesting. And then later, Pat Price died. And so, but then, when Skip Atwater became the training officer for Grill Flame, he was tasked with giving them all kinds of training, including esoteric targets. So one day he dug out Pat Price's remote viewing of the 4 alien bases and gave that as coordinate numbers only to several of the remote viewers, and they all came back and said, oh, wow, that's an alien base. And they named the same places, and they even talked about what happened at these bases. One is a maintenance base. One is kind of like Central Station, Grand Central Station. That's where they come and go. Another is a weather station. That's the one at Mount Hayes in Alaska. That's where they keep tabs on the environment of this planet. And then the one in Australia is like an R&R place. And they said various types of aliens end up there, and that's where they just sit. I guess that's where they have the holodeck or the bar or something. You know, they fraternize and little rest and recreation area. So he got it all confirmed. And what's incredible here is that I was at a big conference out, and this was several years ago, in Nevada, and Atwater, who is a decorated, retired military intelligence officer, gets up and very blandly begins to tell this story. Yeah, we found 4 alien bases on the Earth, and they come and they go and they replenish their supplies, and they, And I'm watching this audience, and everybody, a lot of people kind of nodding off, and some people are getting up and leaving, and I'm going, holy cow! This guy's sitting there telling us that they've confirmed that there's these alien bases on the planet, and not only is there no news media here covering that, but the people who are here, it's kind of like, oh, okay. I don't know. These are some of the different types of UFOs that they have seen. Some of those may look familiar to them. Some of them maybe not. This is Mel Riley. They decided that all of the UFO activity, and again, they were never officially tasked to go look at UFOs. And yet every time they were tasked to go look at something, they would encounter UFOs. And so they got to really interested about it, and what they decided was there seemed to be a central command. There seemed to be a coordination going between all these sightings. In other words, it's not just flitting here and flitting there. There's some kind of agenda that's being played out. So they decided, well, where's the command center? Who's actually running all of this? So they got Mel Riley, who was one of the best of the remote viewers. In 1988, he went out to look at galactic headquarters, and he said he saw these high jagged mountains and a big blue still lake. He said that reminded him of pictures he'd seen of Lake Titicaca, and that there's a big plateau up there, and on the plateau is a big obelisk type thing, and you come up a big ramp and you go inside, and there's something streaming down, light, energy, whatever. He thought it was a very familiar place to him. And in the middle of it is a little raised dais, and it was almost like a holy place. It was like there was a lot of spiritual energy here. And this was galactic headquarters, whatever it is, for whatever that is. I'm just telling you what was reported. And yeah, I tried it. Actually, the first time I tried remote viewing myself, I really did actually pretty good. I was going to New Mexico, and they told me I was going to there's company's headquarters. So I sat down, and I had a little leg up on the whole thing because years earlier I had done a story on transcendental meditation. So I already knew kind of how to get in a meditative type place, and I did, and I thought, okay, what does this place look like? And I got a very clear picture of this one-story building with kind of high corners on each corner, and it was like a strip, and you notice I said similar to a strip shopping center. And then I drew the floor plan here. There's the reception area, offices, conference room, okay? I went out there, and their so-called headquarters was in a private home, ranch-style home. So I thought, well, I'm not any good. Well, I went out there a year later, and during that year, they had begun to have some success with training people in remote viewing. And so when I went out there a year later, I found out that they are in this office building, which was a strip shopping center with raised tops. The only place, see, I got AOL as analytic overlay. I could see, I knew there was something jutting out of the top of the high corners, and that's where my conscious mind took over. And this is what you have to really control and watch, because I thought, okay, I'm going to New Mexico. It's got to be that southwestern motif. It's probably those logs sticking out there. Well, it turned out it was lions' heads, little metal lions' heads. But you can see that I got that one just about right. And incredibly enough, here is the actual floor plan: reception area, large conference room, entrance, the hallway, the offices, and the other hallway. There's my drawing, and there's the official floor plan. I was 100% on that. And this was a building, when I did the drawing the year earlier, this building had not been built. So this tells us another important thing, and this is something they found in the experimentation at Stanford Research Institute. Remote viewing is not limited by time or space. You can look out into space, you can look back in time, you can look forward in time. I was remote viewing an office building that had not yet been built. But you can see the similarities. I mean, I was 100% on. That kind of blew me away. But I was told that's beginner's luck. You know, when you first try it, you generally do better than if you sit there and work at it for a long time. Now, before any of you run off and say, okay, I'm going to run off and I'm going to remote view and I'm going to find out everything, you know. When I tell you everybody in this audience has the ability to do this, okay, this is true. But I can also say everybody in this audience has the ability to play Chopin on the piano. Well, yeah, you do. But some of you are going to have to work harder at it than others. And if you're like me, I'd have to work at it for years before I could sit down and play Chopin on the piano to make it really sound like anything. But the point is, we all have the ability. And some of us have a little bit of a natural ability, and we may be able to sit down and have a few lessons and really knock out a good tune. And others of us have to work at it for years. So, but don't get the idea that you're just going to sit down and it's going to be 100% effective, because it just doesn't work that way. But if you'll follow the proper protocols, if you'll practice, if you'll work at it, it's just like learning to play the piano. You can't just sit down and play. You have to practice and practice and practice. And if you'll sit down and practice, this techniques can work. Lynn Buchanan was the trainer for them for 8 years, and he teaches remote viewing. What time we got? Great. All right, now let's have a real interactive here, because I don't know what you folks want to know, but if I know something and I can answer questions, let's just, what's on your mind? Where are we today? What's happening? I will make one quick prediction here. I really feel at a gut level that within the next, maybe even this year, and maybe certainly within the next year or two, I think there's going to be some real revelations having to do with disclosure. I think there's going to be some stuff popping out that if you've got your antenna up and you're really paying attention, I think you're going to realize that there's going to be some stuff happening. Actually, it's happening right now. As I mentioned earlier, you know, we're finding out all kinds of things about Mars. We're finding out things about the moon that are all different than what we've been told. We're in a conditioning process. And also think about this. George Bush ran as this physical Republican conservative, and you'd think he'd be the last person in the world to advocate some big massive spending on a space program. And yet, what's he proposed? Missions to Mars and beyond. They know something, and they know it's coming, and they know that things are getting ready to happen, and they are getting us ready for it.
Jim, I just want to say, I've been watching the hearings, and we spoke yesterday. It's very interesting, because I do pay attention very closely and train for this. All of a sudden, they started to identify themselves triangles, or the Belgian calls them the Vulcans. Bush has been coming out and calling himself that we are the Vulcans.
The Vulcans?
The Vulcans, V-U-L-C-A-N-S.
Okay.
And this is the first time, every time he talks about Mars and anything else, Belgium and Europe keeps talking about the triangles.
Right.
The silent Vulcans. Bush has been identifying himself as one of the Vulcans.
Well, that's pretty incredible. Yes, ma'am. What happened to David Hudson? That's a good question. I'm still trying to get in touch with him, and I keep getting these. He's kind of disappeared. He basically, what happened was he was trying to raise a lot of money to build a manufacturing plant to start producing the monatomic white powder that he was going to try to provide to the people of the world, for the benefit of the people of the world. And the next thing you know, the federal government's all over him, and the FCC and the Federal Trade Commission and blah, 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 blah. And the next thing you know, he kind of drops out of sight. And nobody seems to know exactly what's happened to him. I keep hearing that he's still alive and well, doing okay up in Montana or Wyoming, someplace like that. But every time I try to get in touch with him, I can't ever seem to connect. Anybody knows how to get in touch with David Hudson, please let me know. Yes, sir.
Implications of this topic to current presidential politics. The two leading candidates for president.
Okay, yeah, the two leading candidates for president. You can vote for Skull or you can vote for Bones. Okay? And what happens if one or the other gets elected? Okay, if Bush gets elected, the country gets destroyed very quickly. If Kerry gets elected, it's going to get destroyed more slowly. Because the same people are behind them both. Same plans being played out.
With respect to remote viewing, there's certainly a lot of evidence that it is real and the results are beyond chance and so forth.
Yeah.
However, a lot of the remote viewers do disagree on their visions of the future. Ed Dames has in 2 years something catastrophic is going to happen. Other people don't see that. What do you account for those differences? Is it different interpretations of what they see or what?
Yeah. Okay, first off, let me just mention about Dames. And the only thing that bothers me about Dames is because he was one of the ones that I was mixed up with early on. And he's the one that said, we've got to get this information out to the public. And then he's the one who got it stopped. Okay? Dames, you go back and look at his track record. He said, this thing's coming with hail bop, and it's got pathogens in it, and it's going to destroy the whole world within 6 months. Didn't happen, did it? He said, there's Martians hibernating under New Mexico, and they're going to come out in the summer of 1995. And he told Fate magazine, he said, if that doesn't happen, he says, I'm getting out of this whole subject. Well, neither one happened, did it? Okay? So you have to look at the track record for one thing. And so there's a whole different thing there. I don't know what his agenda is, but it's not in agreement with most of the other. You said it, I didn't, but I'm nodding. As far as the others, this bothers me too, because there does seem to be a lot of squabbling going on amongst the remote viewers, but mostly it's over methodology. It's my method's better than your method. Okay, none of them really argue that it's valid, that it works, but they argue over the methodology, coordinate remote viewing versus scientific remote viewing, whatever. And to me, this is really stupid, because it's like when I was researching the military unit, the military remote viewers. The two key things to remote viewing, I think, is cool down and target acquisition. Cool down is where you have to sit down, center yourself, quiet your mind, and get receptive to that small, subtle psychic signal, okay? That's key. If you can't do that, then your chances are you're not going to get target acquisition. The second thing is you got to acquire your target. Now, once you've acquired your target, if you're on target, then there's all kinds of ways of self-interrogation that you can start getting information about the target. But those are the two key things. And so when it comes to cool down, some of the guys said they listened to rock music. I don't know how in the world that works. I can't listen to rock music and think of anything, you know. Others listened to classical music. Others didn't want any music at all. Some laid on couches or cots. Some sat in a chair. Some went outside, sat under the trees. Okay? So it was a very individual thing as to how they achieved cool down. The key thing is just if you achieve cool down. Target acquisition the same way. There's various things. Some people envision, what was this TV show where they would jump between alternate dimensions? Sliders, that's it, sliders. And they would have a little shimmering pool thing hanging in midair, and they'd like jump through it, you know, and they'd be somewhere else. So some of the remote viewers envision a thing like that, and when they jump through, they're at their target, okay? My particular technique is that I close my eyes and visualize myself sitting in a theater, empty theater. There's nobody in the big theater, but there's nobody but me sitting in the center section staring at the big screen, and it's blank. Nothing's on there yet. And I call on my personal little projectionist, and I say, hey, show me, and I give them the coordinate number, okay? And then I'll wait and see what comes up on the screen. It's whatever works for you. You know, it's a very individualistic thing, so I think it's really ridiculous that they argue with each other over all this methodology when it's so highly individualistic. Does that answer your question, I hope? Okay. What else do we need to know today? Yes, sir.
Yeah, the Monroe Institute. Do you consider it a legitimate place?
Yeah. That's, in fact, the military remote viewers, one of the first things they did when they started them on their training was send them to the Monroe Institute. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Again, now, you know, when I say that, I'm not putting 100% blanket approval on everybody. I'm sure there's this, that, and the other thing, and I know I've had long discussions with Joe McMoneagle, and there's a few things I wonder about, and I may not totally agree with him, but as far as he and Atwater, are they legitimate remote viewers? Yes. And are they following, you know, good established protocols? Yes. Okay. But of course, even Joe McMoneagle, this blew me away, he told me that his accuracy rating was something incredibly low, like 40% or something like that, which I have a hard time believing, because I think he's really better than that. But even the best of them can have a bad day, okay? And the main thing is I would not trust any remote viewer who simply goes and sits in a chair for a few minutes and gets up and says, this is this. Because it's not that clear cut. You can make mistakes. You can get off. As Lynn Buchanan once told me, I was saying, well, apparently it's the preponderance of evidence. If you have 10 remote viewers and 8 say thus and such, and 2 say something different, then the tendency is to believe the 8. But as Lynn Buchanan said, sometimes the 2 might be on target and really have it closer to truth than the 8. So it's not a surefire thing. But if you would target things over and over, and you have to keep working the target, as they say. You'll see in the Secret of Redgate, one of the stories was 2 small kids who would go out to the woods near their rural ranch home and meet with aliens. Okay? Well, we wanted to know what the remote viewers had to say about that. We had 8 remote viewers, okay? And in this case, it was a triple-blind test. In other words, we wanted to know what happened to the kids in the woods. That was the target. What happened to them in the woods? So then a target number, coordinate number, was worked up, sent to a tasker who did not know the story, did not know the object of the test, only had the coordinate number, who then passed the coordinate number to the monitor, who did not know anything except just this number, who then passed the number to the viewer. All 8 viewers came back to one degree or another with one detail or another, saying these are 2 small children who went in the woods and met aliens. Bingo. Now, when you do that kind of test and you get that kind of results, then you can start putting some credence in what's going on. Yes?
Did you ever have anybody remote view the assassination?
Yes, I have. Actually, there's been 2 that I know of. One I precipitated myself. We were getting ready to, way back when I was working on Sci-Spies, and Mel Riley was part of that, by the way. And we got right up to the time. Basically, I said, I just want to see a remote viewing session so I can just see what it looks like in operation. And it's really not much to look at. You see a guy, 2 people sitting at a table, and the guy's got some paper and a pencil, and he's looking around and he scribbles stuff. You know, it's really not any big deal, except it's the results. And just as the thing was about to begin, you know, I told the monitor, you know, Riley couldn't hear this. I said, have him remote view the Kennedy assassination. So he starts off, and he gets the coordinate, and he starts off making his ideogram, and he's making kind of like this little S curve thing, you know. I'm thinking, what is that about, you know? And he's going, yeah, okay, I'm on target. He says, okay, seems like there's rustlings, maybe leaves, maybe a crowd of people, blah, you know, blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, a crowd of people, I'm getting more impressed, but I still don't understand what this S curve thing is. And then all of a sudden he drew a straight line like a T across the top of it, and all of a sudden I'm going bingo, because if you've ever been to Dealey Plaza in Dallas, you'll know that Houston Street runs north-south, and Elm curves, and it actually makes a S curve down through Dealey Plaza. And so the monitor said, where did he said something to the effect of, this is an incident or something happened here, and he said, where did it happen? And he makes an X down here on the S curve at just about, of course this is a piece of paper and it's, you know, not specific, but it was right there where the headshot would have taken place. And so it keeps going that way. Then he starts sketching, and he sketches little stick figures standing on a street with trees behind them and buildings sticking up behind that, and I'm going, holy cow, because that's exactly what you see in Dealey Plaza. And then about that time, Riley says, I want to call I forget what they call it, some kind of break. I got a break. And he goes outside to smoke a cigarette, and he was obviously kind of shaken up, okay? Something had really disturbed him. And when he comes back in, the monitor says, you know what the target is, don't you? He said, yes, it's the Kennedy assassination. And it blew him away because he had been in the military his whole life. He had never read or studied anything about the assassination. He had always believed the government that, you know, Oswald did it and that was it. And what he was seeing was shots coming from different directions. So, yes, they've done that. And Joe McMoneagle, I think, has done a remote viewing of the Kennedy assassination. And they've all said, yes, multiple gunmen from multiple directions, which, of course, I knew that just from my research for all these years. Now, here's what's fascinating, and it has not been done, and I wish somebody could do it. In the military, they were able, one of the things they did get tasked with was, you know, everybody knows what a MIRV warhead is, right? That's multiple vehicle reentry vehicles or something. That means you got one warhead that can break into severals. All right, and the idea of this is that you got, say, 20 warheads that break apart and they're coming in. Half of them have nuclear weapons in them, the other half don't. How do we know which ones to concentrate and stop on and stop? Well, we don't. So they were trying to figure out a defense against this, and so they were trying to task them, how can you tell which ones have legitimate nuclear weapons and how many don't? And you know what they had to do? Because just viewing the warhead itself wouldn't tell them the answer. They had to look inside, they had to look at the material that was inside, and they had to backtrack mentally to see where the material came from, and then they could see which mining operation the material came from, and from that they could finally figure out which was the real uranium and which was something else. So they could do it, but it was a involved and laborious process. So you can track stuff back, okay? Another thing popped in my head, this is a great story, and I think it was Joe McMoneagle, was tasked, was given a coordinate and a task to look at something, and a target, and all he kept coming up with was this green fields and clouds and these cows standing around, you know. Well, it turned out his target was a leather wallet. So he was on target, but he was kind of back a little bit, okay? He was back when the leather wallet had just been a cow. All right, thanks. We're about to wind up here. Yeah. Yeah.
A month ago, it's either Odyssey or Spirit photographed in the sky an object circling Mars. It was elongated and circling. So they answer you.
Yeah. Yeah, there's lots of interesting stuff on Mars that we either haven't found yet or they're not telling us about. Well, you know, for years the whole idea was we did not want the militarization of space. We wanted to try to start cutting back on nuclear weapons, and now it seems like we're all just turning around. But by the way, I'm going to leave you with this. I don't have any personal animosity towards President Bush because as I see him, he's a post-turtle, okay? A post-turtle. Down in Texas, you drive down an old backcountry road, and you know, there's not a lot to do back in the rural areas. So one of the gags is you find a turtle and you stick him up on a fence post, you know, and he's up there wobbling around. Okay, so that's a post turtle. And when you see a post turtle, you realize that he didn't get there by himself. Okay, somebody put him up there, and he can't do anything while he's up there. And all you really want to do is help the poor creature down. And I'm not even trying to tell you this is true. I'm just telling you that I interviewed 8 separate individuals at this hospital out there, and they said yes. Some of them been there as long as 20 years or more, and they said these stories have been there all along, and that when you start hearing the stories, it sounds like the usual ghost story, okay? Lights going off and on, footsteps heard, nobody there, doors opening and closing, elevators opening and closing, people encountering spots of intense cold. You know, okay, typical haunting thing, except the story is, and the people, at least 2 people I talked to who have actually seen this apparition, one of them more than once, say it's not human. It's a little bitty small guy with a great big head and great big eyes, okay? Sounds like a gray, all right? Now, when I find out this hospital, prior to 1967, was the base hospital for Walker Air Force Base there in Roswell. And it was built in the early 50s over the exact same spot of the previously wooden base hospital for Roswell Army Airfield. Now, isn't that, to me, this is just bizarro, but there you go, Casper the Friendly E.T. or something. All right, first off, let's talk about future technology from the past, okay? We had to invade Iraq. We just had to. You know, we just had to. I mean, there wasn't any arguing. The world said, don't do that. At least 50% of the American public says don't do that. Scott Ritter, our own weapons inspector, says they don't have any weapons of mass destruction. Hans Blix, the United Nations weapons inspector, says they don't have any weapons of mass destruction. The United Nations Atomic Energy Agency out of Vienna said no, they don't have any weapons of mass destruction. You know, and it's a preemptive strike. You know, we think maybe you're going to do something to us, so we're going to attack you first. What if every nation in the world took that philosophy? We'd be in a world of hurt, wouldn't we? Think of Mexico, where the United States say, you know, you people have messed with us for years. We think you're going to mess with us in the future, so we'll just invade you today. Come on, folks. But anyway, we had to get in there. Why? Oh, well, it's the oil. It's the oil. We had to get their oil. No, man. Before the invasion, they were shipping something like 3 million barrels of oil a day. For one thing, we were dependent only on about 16% of our imported oil from Iraq. But still, they were a member of OPEC, and they were pumping. The gas pipelines, they were flowing. We were getting about 3 million barrels a day. Okay, then we launched our attack, and it all got shut off, okay, because it's at war, and they're blowing up the pipeline. People are fighting. And now they finally got it back going again a little bit, but as I understand it, we're only getting less than 1 million gallons a day. So we're getting less oil out of Iraq today than we were before we invaded it. So, you know, obviously it's not about oil. And besides that, we don't even need oil. We got, you know, we got Sandia oil reserves. We got oil reserves in this country and in other places that we haven't even really begun to tap yet. And then even more basic than that is we don't even need the damn oil anyway. We need to be going to alternative energy sources, cleaner energy sources. I've had engineers tell me that with a little tweaking of the carburetor, we could probably all be running hydrogen in our cars, okay, with no pollution. And if that doesn't work, then we could all shift to diesels and start running biodiesel. Everybody know about biodiesel? Hey, biodiesel you get from soybeans, corn, any kind of organic material. About a year ago, I'm in Amsterdam, and I decided I'd play tourist and ride one of their little boats around through the canals and see the city, and it was great. And after looking at all the sights for about 30 minutes, I suddenly realized the little sign that was right on the window in front of my face, you know, and it said, powered by biodiesel. Okay? This is diesel fuel that'll run on any diesel engine, runs just fine, and it's made from organic matter. Okay? Soybean, corn, whatever. So why don't we have that? Well, for that very reason. All you got to do is go find somebody with a patch of land, you can make your own fuel. They can't get a monopoly over it. Same thing with hydrogen, all you elements. So the something turned out to be elements that were unknown to modern science. And they're composed of a single atom, and so therefore they're called monatomic elements. Now, monatomic elements are everywhere. They're in the food we eat, the water we drink, and everything else, but as being a single atom, needless to say, that's not something that we just normally deal with. And he found out that these monatomic elements could be retrieved from such metals as gold, silver, copper, cobalt, nickel, and platinum, palladium, rhodium, iridium, ruthenium, all those iniums, okay? And, but then when they would take it to get it analyzed, nobody could quite figure out what it was. And after a 2-year study, he had an Arizona analytical chemist told him, he said, I can without equivocation tell you that this is not any of the other elements on the periodic table. He said, what we have here is something that I know to be pure rhodium, and yet none of the spectroscopic analysis are saying it's rhodium. He said, this makes absolutely no sense to me. This is defying everything I've been taught in college. He said, I'm going to send this back to my graduate professors at Iowa State. Well, the learned gentlemen at Iowa State, they couldn't figure out what it was either. And so they finally sent it to the Harwell laboratories in Oxfordshire, England, for neutron activation, but they too failed to identify what this material was. He finally found a breakthrough by going to the then Soviet Academy of Sciences, where they were able, through some very, very sophisticated equipment, to finally come up and identify what it was. And they said that this is elements composed entirely of platinum group metals in a form previously unknown to modern science. Something very new and unusual was revealing itself. In 1988, David Hudson applied and received 11 patents on monatomic elements worldwide, filing both in the United States and in other countries. Now, he coined the term ORME, orbitally rearranged monatomic elements. What's really fascinating is ORME is also ancient Hebrew for the tree of life. All right. So he's been working with various people, including Dr. Hal Puthoff. Some of you may remember that name. He was the one that was instrumental in developing remote viewing for the CIA and then the Army. He is a physicist who is now working on 0-point energy, which I'm sure some of you have heard about. All right, and I think that what we're doing here is closing in on the reality of all this. Here is just a rundown on some of the recent scientific papers. You'll notice they range from 1988, 89, 90, 92. Okay. You haven't heard about this because it's still cutting-edge physics, cutting-edge science, but it is the object of numerous scientific papers. And what they're finding out is that, and what we're actually talking about here, is the manipulation of energy at the atomic and even subatomic level, which is very exciting because this could lead to all kinds of things. They find by taking gold and melting it in a certain way, reducing it through heat, that they can actually come up with a white powdery substance that are these pure monatomic elements. Now, when they put the white powder on a scale, they find that the white powder lost 44% of its original weight. But even more astounding, the weighing pan weighed less than it did before they put the powder in it. Outfit, right? I've got a nice coat on, and okay, good. Now I can just talk. I'm already worn out, and I hadn't even started. All right, this is the workshop, and this is going to be cool because basically I want to make this interactive. Some of you may have seen some of the stuff, some of you haven't. I don't think you know this stuff, so I'm going to start off with this. But actually, first I want to tell you about Redgate. This is one of the most fascinating stories I've come across in my research and investigation of UFOs. Redgate is the name of an area up in the mountains east of a little town in Montana called Deer Lodge. It has been the object of urban legends and rumors and stories for at least 50 years. Come to find out, what we found out when we took a camera crew up there We have 32 signed releases from people in the town who've all had some sort of UFO experience or have seen something or experienced something, and I think that's pretty phenomenal for a small town of 3,000 people. And it makes me wonder how many other small towns in America may have a similar type situation. We took some of the better stories, and what we did, and I think this may be one of the first times that, yeah. It's next. Yeah, it's the speaker next door. I don't know what we can do about that. Okay, I can't adjust the mic here. I'll just have to talk real loud. What we did was take some of the best stories and then subject them first to polygraph examination. It showed that no one we talked to, no one that participated in this study showed any signs of deception, okay? Then we got their conscious interviews. What's that? Oh, cool. Oh, yeah. Thanks. No deception. Then we got their conscious interviews about what they remembered about the event. And then we got them to submit to hypnosis, put them under hypnosis, got further details of the event, and then we took the event and had it studied by certified, qualified remote viewers. And it's pretty phenomenal. And then we put the whole thing together, did some dramatic reenactments, have some tremendous illustrations by a really great artist, even a little animation, original music score, tried to make something that was not only informative but also entertaining. And so if any of y'all have a chance, I would hope that you go and avail yourselves of watching The Secret of Redgate. And they're going to be showing it here at the conference. It's only been shown once before, and that was before it actually was totally finished. And yet we took it to the 13th Annual International UFO Conference in Laughlin, Nevada. And I'm quite proud to state that we won the coveted EBE People's Choice Award, which is basically like first place. And I'm really excited about that because the competition included some very good documentaries from England and a documentary professionally produced by the Sci-Fi Channel. So with their deep pockets and professionals. So yeah, I was very gratified that we took the award out there. So I think I can assure you of having a very interesting experience watching The Secret of Redgate. Okay. I don't know if we'll have a chance to get into this, but if any of y'all have seen the latest issue of UFO magazine, you may have seen my little piece about the alien ghost in Roswell. Now, I know that probably sounds about as bizarre as anything you can think of. I mean, you know, what's weirder than a space alien? A space alien's ghost. But I assure you that all you got to do is get an electrolyzing plate, crack water, you get hydrogen and oxygen. All right? So, hey, they can't get a monopoly on that. So what are they trying to get a monopoly on? We'll see. Fuel cells, that's what's coming up, okay? Because, and what if fuel cells are dependent upon expensive metal, even gold. All right? So there's energy is involved, but there may be something even more than that. It may be future technology from the past. In the past, in history, what we find worldwide are the stories of flight. The Chinese flying dragons, okay, the Bahamas of the Hindus, where they flew through the air and attacked cities and stuff. We got everywhere. We got Ezekiel on a flaming wheel flying through the air. Come on. Our whole human history is replete with flight. So there seems to be what the evidence is continuing to build, but nobody seems to want to really contemplate, is that we, far from being the apex of civilization on this planet, we are just now pulling ourselves out of our true dark age, following a total collapse of a highly technological civilization that was on this planet, perhaps even planet-wide, in prehistory. So we're just now rediscovering things that people in this world knew about thousands and thousands of years ago. Now, I hope this little thing works. No, of course not. Oh, boy. But it's not changing. Well, maybe let's try this. Ah. Thanks, Keith. It's always nice to have somebody who knows something around. I start off here by quoting from the Bible, Ecclesiastes. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There's nothing new under the sun. The ancients told us this, but we still go along thinking that, you know, we're the apex of civilization, and if that's the case, God save us. You know, I've got a friend who's going through chemotherapy right now, and it just really is killing me because I know beyond any reasonable shadow of a doubt that in not too many years we're going to look back on chemotherapy the way that today we look back on leeching. You know, oh my God, they really did that? You know, why in the world would anybody do that? You know, it's incredible. All right. Oh, hell, I went too far. All right. Let's back into this by talking about the latest scientific stuff. This is a fellow named David Hudson. David Hudson was a farmer in the Phoenix area, okay, back in the 70s, late 70s. Now, don't get the idea that he had an old beat-up Chevrolet pickup truck and, you know, and a mule. This guy was a multi-million-dollar farmer, but he was having a tough time of it because if any of y'all ever been to Phoenix, you know that it seems like half the year it's about 115 degrees, and that soil out there gets very baked and hard and dry. And he was trying to figure out how to make his farming operation work, so he began to spray soil samples with a cyanide solution. He's trying to figure out how to break up the soil, make it more arable. And what he found was when he put these chemicals, started treating the chemicals in the soil, he would get flashes. Something was flashing and something was popping. So he got to doing some analysis, and he found out in his soil were traces of gold, silver, platinum metals. So then he got the big idea, well, wait a minute, I got earth movers and I got all this stuff. Why don't, maybe I just got my old gold mine here. Maybe I can just pull enough of these precious minerals out of the soils to start making a living on that. So he used a copper electrowinning cell, and he began to run the soil samples through there trying to separate out these elements. And he came out with an element that nobody could figure out what it was. And they were single atom.
They have a lot of rare material and books and videos that you can only get here. So this is a rare opportunity to get some special items. And also, don't forget to thank Stephen Bassett for his extraordinary effort in bringing together this first time ever conference. He's done a fantastic job. And also, thanks for your patience with our first time effort. We're working out little glitches along the way, just to be expected, but it's a very positive, supporting environment, and we appreciate that. Up next is someone whose reputation precedes him. Can I say that, Jim? Jim Mars is an award-winning journalist. He's the author of numerous books, including Alien Agenda, Investigating the Extraterrestrial Presence Among Us. His other book, Crossfire, The Plot That Killed Kennedy, was published to critical acclaim and within 3 years had gone into an 8th printing in both hardbound and softbound editions. Crossfire reached the New York Times paperback nonfiction bestseller list and became a basis for the Oliver Stone film JFK. He's also the author of the book Rule by Secrecy. He's appeared on numerous television network programs, including CNN, including the Discovery Channel, and many, many others. And he's also appeared on Larry King Live, Montel Williams, and the list goes on and on. I also want to mention that he has his workshop, Alien Agenda. His Alien Agenda book was a top-selling UFO book in the world, and it is published in at least 5 languages. Jim has just also finished his new project, The Secret of Redgate. It's a 1.5-hour documentary. He's brought it here for our viewing pleasure this weekend. He'll be talking about that somewhat, but it's available for your viewing here at the conference. It is a multidisciplinary investigation of a small Montana town that has had many ongoing experiences and sightings for at least 50 years. And Jim says it's the first time that remote viewing was used. So that is going to be an incredible thing for him to talk about as well. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome Jim Marrs.
Okay, good morning. I don't know about you all, but okay, you see my authority figure out